This is Chapter 1, Section 2, Forms of Government. So things that you should be able to accomplish after this section, different kinds of government according to 3 sets of characteristics, systems of government based on who can participate, different ways that power is distributed, and government by the distribution of power between executive and legislative branches. So our key terms for this section, autocracy, is one of the forms of a dictatorship. An autocracy is when there is one person in control. You can remember that by A is usually singular autocracy, one person. An oligarchy is when it is a group of people that are in charge, usually a small group that have appointed themselves to power. That is the second form of a dictatorship. A unitary government is when there is one central agency, like this isn't what we have in the United States, but if we did, it'd be like if we had Washington, D.C., but not all of the local governments, just one central government. A federal government is what we have in the United States. We have a central agency and then a number of local governments as well, and they split the power half and half between central and local. So we have Washington, D.C., and then we have all of our state governments as well, like Jefferson City. Division of powers is when there's a split between the central and local governments. The power is distributed between both of them. A confederation is when there are multiple independent local governments or state governments that form an alliance together. A presidential government is also what we have here in the United States. It is split between the executive and legislative branches. They are separate. We have a president, that's the executive branch, and Congress, that is the legislative branch. So they are separate from one another, but they do have equal power. A parliamentary government, like for example in Britain, is where they have the executive branch and the legislative branch are together. So the executive, there they call the executive, the prime minister, is part of the legislative branch, is part of the lawmaking branch of the government as well. Okay, so some different forms of government that we have throughout the world, democracies and dictatorships. We separate those depending on who can participate. In a dictatorship, the people do not participate. In a democracy, we do. Unitary, federal, and confederation governments are classified by how the power is divided geographically. In a unitary government, it is one central agency that then has a choice whether or not they want to distribute any power. In a federal government, they have a central agency, a federal government, and then several local governments as well. In a confederation, it is a group of various independent local governments that then form an alliance to serve various purposes within that confederation. Presidential and parliamentary governments, those are defined by the relationship between the executive and legislative branches. So in a presidential, they are separate. We have our executive is one branch and legislative is another branch. That is not true in a parliamentary government. Their executive and their legislative branches are together. A direct or pure democracy. This may confuse you because in the United States we do not have a direct democracy. A direct democracy is when the people themselves vote on everything. They vote on every issue, and this really doesn't work anywhere because there's just too many people and too many issues for everybody to vote all the time. The only way this ever really works is in small towns, like we have town meetings occasionally where people can come and vote on local issues, on small issues. What we do have is a representative democracy or a indirect democracy. This is when we elect people, senators, House Representative members, that then vote on our behalf for various issues in Congress, for new laws being passed in Congress, because there's so many that we can't always do it on our own. So we pick people who we think would be a good representative for us, and then they vote on our behalf. So we have a representative democracy. A constitutional monarchy is, for example, what they have in the United Kingdom. They have a monarchy, they still have a queen, but they also have a constitution where the legislative body is elected by the people, and they carry out most of the government duties. In the U.S., we have a constitution-based federal republic. Okay, so that means constitution-based, we have a constitution and blueprint to how our government is supposed to be run. Federal meaning it is broken up between a central government and local governments. And republic, we vote on our representatives to vote for us in Congress. President and members of Congress are both elected by the people, and our president is both the chief of state and the head of government, the person that represents us to the rest of the world. Okay, the difference between an autocracy and an oligarchy. An autocracy is when one person is in control, remember A, one, and an oligarchy is when a small group is in control. Okay? They are both dictatorships, and in both situations, the people do not have any power. An example of a dictatorship, we still refer to China as a dictatorship because even though that they do hold elections, when they do have elections, there's still only one political party on the ballot, so they really don't have much of a choice. Another one is Myanmar, or what we sometimes refer to as Burma, where it is military rule. Okay, so back to a unitary government, there is a strong central agency, like what we would call Washington, D.C., the federal government, and then they can decide whether or not they want to distribute any power to local governments. Federal government is like what we have. We have a strong central agency, but also various local agencies as well, like Jefferson City. In theory, the power is supposed to be equally divided between the central government and the local government. A confederate government, we have a lot of independent local governments and then one central agency that they use to form an alliance together. An example might be the European Union, when we have independent states like France and Germany, but then they have an alliance together to serve certain purposes. For example, the EU has now adopted the euro, so they all have the same currency that they use. Presidential government, again, like we have here in the United States, a division between the executive and the legislative branch. The president is elected and our representatives are elected as well. They serve in different branches, but they are co-equal to one another. The president has a system of checks and balances that he can undo things that the legislative branch does, and the legislative branch can also undo certain things that the president does. Parliamentary government, this is different. This is where the chief executive and the legislators are in the same branch. So, for example, how this works, like in Great Britain, where they have a parliamentary government, the people elect their representatives to the legislative body, and then the legislative body will then elect their chief executive. So the people themselves do not elect their prime minister. The legislators do that for them. The prime minister then, he or she is the head of the leading party of parliament. They can choose their cabinet members to help them carry out their duties. But then if parliament loses confidence in the prime minister, they can vote to remove them from office. Alright, so that concludes section 2. We will start with section 3 next time.